Good evening, everybody. This is the March 13th meeting of the Annapolis Conservancy Board. It's 5:32 p.m. We're going to go ahead and get started. I circulated the agenda last week. Hopefully everybody had a chance to check that out. Just as kind of an aside there, does everyone have access, or has everyone tried at least to access the Google Drive? I put a link to the agenda on the Google Drive in the last email that I sent, but I just want to make sure that everyone's got access to that because there's a bunch of good materials in there. Cool. Because I know like we've got, so my next item is welcoming our new members, which I think Sally's attended before. I'm not sure if Aaron, if you've attended a meeting, but I really very happy to have our two new members here, Sally Albright and Aaron McCready. They're bringing some really good skills and experience to the Conservancy Board. So I'm really excited. Some of the ideas that I have for how Aaron and Sally can really help strengthen this board and our goals. So I would love to turn it over to, I guess, Aaron first, just to introduce yourself briefly. And if you have anything that you want to, say about your background or what, what brought you to the Conservancy Board, Sally will swing over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Can you all hear me okay? My name is Aaron McCready. I live in the Homewood neighborhood of Annapolis near the Bush Library. I've been in Annapolis for about 8 years now. And I have spent the first decade of my career in finance, mostly in climate finance, a lot of wind, a lot of solar, quite a bit of ecological restoration projects as well. And about 2 years ago, started a business doing ecological restoration focused on riparian forest buffer tree planting in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. A lot of projects in Pennsylvania and Virginia and all over. And so combination of finance and ecological restoration and just, passionate about conservation and green space. So excited to be here. And thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Aaron. Sally, I can't remember if we gave like a formal introduction, but I would love since Aaron wasn't here, if you want to, reintroduce yourself. And maybe actually we could introduce everybody just so that we're all kind of familiar with each other. I think at some point we'll meet in person, but yeah, Sally, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, and that would be great. I'd love to hear a more detailed intro from everybody. My name is Sally Albright, and I am the outreach coordinator for the Anne Arundel County Bureau of Watershed Protection and Restoration. And so my background is in education and outreach and as well as grants. So I started as their grants manager back in 2019, and I have I lived in the county my whole life, grew up in Edgewater, and now I have lived in Annapolis proper for about 5 years now. I now live in the Fairwinds community by the Giant off of Bay Ridge. And yeah, I'm just really excited to learn more about my community, to be of support with new easement acquisition and maintaining the current easements. I love getting out in the woods, and I have a lot of experience walking through these sites and assessing whether they're in good shape. And I look forward to expanding that skill set and seeing how I can help the board.
Thanks, Sally.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, Karen, if you want to just do a real quick, I know everyone knows you. And for those who don't know, Karen is probably, Karen, I think Karen is our longest serving board member at this point.
Nope, Tom's got me beat.
Oh, Tom. Well, Karen, if you want to just introduce yourself real quickly, just so we're all familiar.
Sure. My name is Karen Jennings. I've been on the board since 2008, and I'm a past chair. I live in Eastport. I've lived in Annapolis since 2005, and I work in stream restoration engineering. I've worked both in private and public sectors. I currently work for Anne Arundel County, same place as Sally.
Thanks, Karen. Linda?
Hi there, I'm Linda Frost. I've lived in Annapolis for about 9 years, I think. Most of that in Eastport, but I moved last year. And my day job, my background is in land conservation. So I work for a national land conservation organization, Trust for Public Lands, and work on conservation easements and acquisition of land for parks and trails and open space.
Thanks, Linda. And Tom, if you're there and can come off of mute, or just doing quick introductions here, and then I would also love to have Dylan and Michael just very briefly introduce themselves. If not, I'll go. So I'm your chair, Jack Turner. I also work in the environmental space right now in the private sector, but I also do a lot of volunteering with on the board at Seven River Association, work with Quiet Waters Park, the Eastport Yacht Club. So really excited. I'm kind of actually seeing this with our new membership and potential, we'll figure out if we have an opening on the board or not, but I'd love to get a full slate of board members for this year and kind of doing this like soft reboot of figuring out our goals, where we are and what we're going to accomplish this year. So Dylan, if you would like to just introduce yourself. Dylan is our city liaison, but I think maybe he has a bit more to say.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dylan McCunich. I'm the Environmental Programs Coordinator. As Jack said, I serve as the Conservancy Board's liaison. So, I help record the minutes and, coordinate different things. I've lived in Anne Arundel County most of my life. I moved here when I was 6 from San Francisco. Went to a Maryland college, studied urban planning. I've done internships with the General Assembly and environmental work. So I'm happy to take my different experiences from different places and apply it to this great city and help you guys out with your goals.
Thanks, Dylan.
Mhm.
My name is Michael Isles. I'm the city attorney. I had an attorney assigned to you, so we're down a staff person. So that attorney is now no longer with the office. And so I'm assigned to provide legal advice and whatever other legal assistance I can provide regarding code, legislation, things that the Conservancy Board wants to do, and whether or not it is legal under a city code or state law.
Thanks, Michael. And so does that mean that I think it was Jessica? We had Ashley for a bit, and then it was Jessica for a brief spell. So does that mean that Jessica is no longer?
Well, it was Joelle Braithwaite. I had Jessica in for a minute because she was taking up for me because I had something else to do. It's Joelle that had left the office.
Okay.
Jessica has her commissions and boards, and I had her sit in for me because I had something else to do at the first meeting after Joelle departed.
Okay. Thanks for that update.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably have someone else other than me at some point, but we're in the hiring mode right now.
Excellent. Thank you. And understood. All right. So moving along here, I'm just really excited. Thanks everybody. I think that was useful just to get, put faces and names and a little bit of background. So thanks a lot for that. Our next item on the agenda is approving these minutes. They're starting to kind of stack up. I would like to move to approve, or I would like to open any discussion on the previous minutes. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to review them, but would love to get these off of our plate. So the March 14th, 2024, so actually almost 1 year ago, these meeting minutes. Does anyone have any discussion on them, or could I make a motion to approve the minutes?
You can't make the motion, Mr. Chair. You need to ask for a motion.
Do I have a motion to approve, or is there any discussion on the minutes? Excuse me. All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 14th, 2024?
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from March 2024.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Excellent. All in favor of approving the March 14th, 2024 meeting minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. The motion passes. On to the next one, the May 9th, 2024 meeting minutes. I think the reason that these are still on here is because there was some transition last year and we maybe didn't get the minutes before we met. And so they've kind of lingered on here. Is there any discussion on the May 9th, 2024 meeting minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the May 9th, 2024 meeting minutes?
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from May 2024.
I second that.
All right, all in favor of approving the May 9th, 2024 meeting minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Yay. All right, and our final meeting minute approval for this evening, the September 12th, 2024 meeting minutes. Any discussion on those meeting minutes?
I believe I missed that meeting, so I'll probably abstain
Okay,
on that one.
okay.
I don't have them in front of me to check and verify, but I think I was out of town that week.
I
that
will,
week.
so in the future, if there are meeting minutes that are that we're going to request approval for, I will circulate those along with the agenda. I think that would be helpful. So I'll make a note to do that. All right, so the September 12th, 2024 meeting minutes, do I have a motion to approve those?
I'll move that we approve those meeting minutes.
All right, do we have a second? I guess Sally and Aaron were not on the board at the time of that meeting. So how
Can I, Mr. Lyles, is it okay for me to second if I'm going to plan to abstain from the vote since I wasn't at that meeting?
That's okay.
Okay, I'll second it then.
Thank you, Karen. All right, all in favor of approving the September 12th, 2024 meeting minutes? Aye.
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 And one abstention from Karen. And we don't have Patrick Brown in here this evening, and kind of unclear if he is still planning on participating in the board. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on throughout our agenda here. We've got our duties, and this should actually say 2025 goals. Sorry, that didn't get updated.
Hey,
So-
Jack, real quick. I hate
Yeah.
to cut you off. Do I owe you minutes from November?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure to get that your way.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So board, once I get the minutes from Dylan, I will circulate those for your consideration and feedback. And then I will also recirculate them along with our agenda for our next meeting. So that way you have, it'll, maybe it'll be like a packet of things to review before the meeting. That's my intent, at least. So for Sally and Aaron, the way that I've structured the agenda, which is a bit of a change from, I think, the older way that we structured the agenda, was I reviewed what the Conservancy Board has been tasked with, our kind of duties as assigned by the city, and I created kind of a subheading for each of those duties as assigned. So there are five kind of roles that the Conservancy Board plays, and they're in no particular order other than the order that they were on the website. So under each of those headings, there are action items, things to discuss, and it's kind of my vision that there's some sort of the labor, the work of these different goals and duties is kind of led by one person or a group of people, and we all kind of share some responsibility between all of them. So that's kind of one of my goals here, is trying to figure out who would be either interested or best suited to kind of help lead on an individual duty or duties. So I would encourage you to keep that in mind as we go through the rest of our meeting. So under our first duty is solicit the dedication of properties to the city. And you'll notice some of these goals are kind of intermingled, like encouraging preservation of environmentally sensitive land and soliciting dedication of properties to the city are a little bit linked there. But so under soliciting dedication of properties to the city, this is something that Linda and I have worked on a bit in the past, although I think it has languished a bit, probably mostly to my own fault. But looking at potential new properties that could be dedicated to the city or that would have, conservation value. I circulated along with the agenda in my last email, there was an interactive greenways map. And I know that for our existing board members, everyone's probably familiar with that, but Sally and Aaron, if you hadn't had a chance to look at it yet, it's a really neat map. And actually, if I could share my screen, I'm gonna pull it up. Is that showing up?
Mhm.
Cool. So as kind of a first order here, I would really appreciate if everyone could take a look at this map again, or take a look at it if you hadn't had a chance to yet. And what I'd really like to accomplish under this first duty is getting some feedback from everyone on this board. And then maybe, if Linda and I want to remain as kind of the leads on this, or if anyone else would like to support, I certainly would appreciate the input. So this map shows a couple of different layers. You've got existing easements and potential easements, which have this kind of hash line around them. And this came from a couple of different data sources, including, I think, the Conservancy board before I was a member. So if you look throughout, there are a lot of potential easements. This is the St. Luke's Restoration of Nature. There's a bunch of potential new easements, and those have come from community input, from the Conservancy board, and probably from some other sources. So I would really like to ask this board to take a look at this map and maybe choose one or a couple of these potential new easements that you think would be your highest priority, and why. And I would love to kind of come together and have a discussion of that, because when you look at this map, there are probably 30 or maybe more potential new easements, and it's just not, it's like, it's too much for us to try to understand or try to pursue all of these. So I think having some sort of board input as a first step to prioritization would be helpful. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah. I have a question. Do you already have a system for trying to prioritize, or are you trying to create the system to prioritize? Like, are there ideas for what you would want to try to filter out, like maybe by size, or if it's owned by an individual versus owned by some kind of, limited investment group or something like that?
That's a great question, Sally. And I think that we've had some ideas, although they've been more conceptual than we've actually put them down in like some sort of selection prioritization matrix. So that process has not been formalized, other than, just in our discussions, but
Cool.
I think that would be a great idea.
If I could just add to that, a lot of that's already integrated to what the potential easements are on this map, because when the Conservancy board was identifying potential easements, like we thought about things like linking corridors, like green corridors, or trying to look for areas where there's not a lot of conserved green space currently in that neighborhood, and areas around waterways or places where there are existing wetlands. So all that's, I think that is already, you could already consider most of that has been already considered, and what's listed on here is potential easements revised. But maybe the one thing that would be helpful is, as Sally mentioned, like looking at ownership. We did think about that a little bit when we were identifying, but we were looking more at like what are, environmentally, like what we would want to target. So that might be a good idea as a way to like narrow it down, is to think about ownership, like who the property owner is, and how likely they are to grant an easement.
Yeah, I would second that. Now it's sort of the practical application and the human knowledge of, the ownership and understanding maybe a little bit about what's going on with a property and looking for any low-hanging fruit.
Gotcha. Very cool. Thank you for all
Yeah,
that
another thing we
information.
might want to think about is like if there are areas that aren't protected right now that we really think are important to protect because of like development pressures or whatever, that might be another way to prioritize. Just as like a sort of bit of history, I guess, for the new members, like historically the easements that the city they're in the city of Annapolis right now, like a lot of them came to the city through the development process. So like when a parcel was being developed, the Department of Planning and Zoning would negotiate like with the developer, like, okay, we'll let you do higher density on this side if you put this side in a conservation easement. So that's why a lot of them came to into being rather than directly approaching a landowner and saying, we want to put your whole parcel into an easement. So I think what we're trying to do now is a little bit different than what the way most of the existing easements came into being. And which is fine. This is just like gotta give you guys a little bit of history
Crash course.
Yeah,
and context.
very
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, that was very, very helpful. And also I think, I would echo your point that historically, the way that conservation easements have come about in the city have been what I would call reactive, as opposed to what we're discussing for this new strategy, which is I would consider to be proactive. I think that's a fair way of framing it.
As well as more through the regulatory, process, development planning versus voluntary conservation.
Thank you, Linda. That's a good, important distinction to make. Yeah. So I think that would be a good.
Quick question, Jack.
Go ahead.
Do we have there been any created materials for soliciting as to the benefits and capabilities, or is that something that we would be looking to create?
That's something that we would be looking to create because I think we were still early on in this process where we hadn't, formalized our selection criteria. We hadn't kind of agreed as a board on if there's an easement we want to pursue. So no, we don't have any of those kind of background materials. But certainly it sounds like something that would be helpful once we get to that point. And Aaron, with considering your background, I'm not sure if you may have something that we could, adapt to the Conservancy board, but I would be all ears for that.
Okay, let me think about it.
Cool. All right, so yeah, just so under the soliciting dedication of properties, I think the bottom line is that it will take some input from all of us. And currently I had kind of tasked Linda and I under this. And so Linda, as long as you're still comfortable with that, I'd like to continue and maybe you and I can put our heads together between now and our next meeting. And also it sounded like Sally had some really good ideas and, as always, Karen has just a wealth of institutional knowledge and background information here. So I really think it'll take some input from all of us if we, would be successful in our new easement initiative.
One
Jack, you
quick
had
question,
mentioned,
Jack.
oh, sorry.
No, after you, Karen.
You had mentioned that Jack, that you wanted each of us to come up with one or two properties that we thought would be good to target. Do you have like a timeline for when you would want that? Like,
so it
just
would
before
be
the
good.
next meeting, or would you want it further in advance so that you and Linda can talk about it? And then,
yeah, I mean, I know
okay.
that we're all volunteers and setting a hard deadline is just a little bit draconian, I think, at this point, but I think that, maybe within a month. So, looking at the middle of April and I can send out a reminder and it doesn't have to be anything really too formal. It's just, if you were looking at a new easement, what do you think would be one of your highest priorities and why that would be? Because I think the why is also an important reason. So I can send out a reminder. I mean, I think if we aim for the middle of April, that would be fair to everyone. And that way we can have time to kind of digest and review as opposed to introducing your ideas at our next meeting. And that way we can have a discussion about it at the next meeting instead of just being introduced to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. And a reminder would be really helpful. So I
Seems
appreciate that.
reasonable. Okay. Cool. So let's
This
say
may be a dumb question. Is there any sort of budget for acquiring easements, or are we all just seeking donations?
the seeking donation at this point. Yeah, the Conservancy Board doesn't have any budget. Although, Mr. Lyles, is the Conservancy Board allowed to request funding for certain things, or
Yes,
not familiar with how that would work?
you can request it
Okay.
through the mayor. Chief of Staff Kate Pettit would be your contact, and or Jackie Guild, who Dylan reports to. We do have a budget now of about $50,000 to assist with identifying the current conservation easements and trying to get some control over the information and data associated with each one. That project is being run out of the mayor's office. We've been tasked with doing the kind of legwork associated with that, and that's on your agenda. So there is budget relationship to the activities that you're undertaking.
Thank you, Mr. Lyles. I actually was not aware of that. So that's new information, and sounds like positive information. And I think that kind of refers back to what we had originally called our data gap analysis, where we had kind of realized that we may not have, full information on all the different easements, their boundaries, and okay.
Yeah, we're engaged in that work and hiring a consultant to assist us with that.
Excellent.
Mhm.
And if I wanted more information on that, I could ask Dylan or Jackie?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Taking a quick note. All right. So yeah, let's set, I think middle of April the 15th, just to get some initial feedback from the board on potential new easements. I'm going to stop sharing. So I will send out a reminder for April 15th, and then I can send something out maybe a week before. I know things can get busy, and yeah, I would really appreciate that. And that way we come into the next meeting prepared to discuss. Under this soliciting dedication of properties, I continue to keep this point on here, the MOU with the county. I know that it is not something that's really in our control, but Mr. Lyles, just for your background information, at some point in the past, there was discussion of creating an MOU with Anne Arundel County to be able to share funding for program open space.
Jack, do you want me to explain?
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, so this actually started like way back in possibly Josh Cohen's administration. It's been like floating around for a long time. But yeah, the idea was that the city gets a share of program open space funds, some of which can go to conserving property. So this kind of answers Aaron's question as well about where money comes from for this. But a situation there had been some informal agreement between the cities, I guess it was the Office of Planning and Zoning and the county Office of Planning and Zoning, I think, about that the county, because the property in the city costs so much money that the yearly share of the program open space that's allotted to the city is not really enough to buy a parcel of property in the city limits, because it's just property is so expensive in the city of Annapolis. And so there was this informal agreement between the city and the county that the city would just let the county use their portion of program open space money every year towards conserving property. But then if a parcel came up that the city wanted to acquire, that the county would then add some funds from their bucket for that year to make up for all the years that the city was letting them spend the city portion so that they could buy a parcel. Well, a situation came up where the city did want to buy a parcel for conservation purposes. That was actually during Ellen Moyer's administration, and the county said no. And so that's sort of where this idea came up of well, maybe we need to formalize this agreement, because they said, well, even though there was this agreement, it had actually been put in writing, but was put in writing by the chair of two departments rather than the mayor and the county executive. So it had no legal bearing. And so that's why the county was able to say, well, that agreement doesn't mean anything. And so the
Doesn't matter.
idea
The
was
MOU still wouldn't mean anything.
it, even if it was between the mayor and the county executive.
They could always terminate it to do something else because an MOU is just a memorandum of understanding. It doesn't
Yeah.
commit any governmental body to do anything that they, in the long term or in another term, don't want to do.
Mm.
We MOUs are used by governmental entities that exist on the same plane to agree. But it's we wouldn't be able to hold their feet to the fire unless there was a contractual agreement, which we generally don't do with other governmental agencies. It's something that's just not done. It's because if there's a dispute, then we're taking Anne Arundel County to court. It's not a good idea. So to the extent that we can operate by ourselves, unless there was some emergency reason to do it, I would say we need to look critically at whether or not we need to strike up that kind of agreement. We could do it, just understand that you still can get a no about anything in it.
Okay. Well, I think Ashley Leonard had drafted it. I thought it was being circulated I thought it was like with the county's attorneys or something at the moment.
That was my understanding too.
Yeah, so I think it's in process. But anyway, the idea was just like to kind of at least say that the city and the county would work together because, sometimes, right now, like the city and the county are working together great, but there have been times in the past where the county executive and the mayor didn't get along. And so there may be times where the MOU could be helpful. So
we can
I
look
think that
at
was
it.
some of the
I
idea.
need you to, we can look at it. I just need someone, Jack, maybe to send me whatever you think was done on it. Because I'm new to the Conservancy board and have been in the city for 5 years, there may be some things that I'm not privy to, but I can find it very quickly and go to Ashley and see where she is on it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that just because another person in the government signs it, it doesn't have any more contractual binding than a letter. It just does. It's just a political document that helps the folks understand where we can agree on things and where we disagree on things and what should happen, kind of like a procedural, a standard operating procedure. But we definitely can get it done for you.
Yeah, I think the idea was just to bring it to the modern era of, bring that understanding forward.
Right. Yeah. Just
We'll take care of it.
Slightly more established than a verbal kind of thumbs up, to have something down on paper. But Michael, thank you. That was really helpful that an MOU does not require either party to do anything. It's just a piece of paper. That sounds like. So I'll follow up. I know I've had some email traffic about it. It's probably been a while, but I'll follow. I think I had talked with Jackie about it, maybe a year ago. So I made a note to follow up there. Thank you. All right, under our next duty as assigned, we have the duty to administer and manage said properties being conservation easements that the Conservancy Board is stewarding in the city. So under here, and for those who are newer, Sally and Aaron, I'm not sure if you were familiar with MDRRC, the Maryland Resource Reentry Center. They've participated in a few of our meetings now, and they actually have a Chesapeake Climate and Conservation Corps member who's working with them, Devin, and Devin was working on some materials that I think would be beneficial for the Conservancy Board, specifically an inspection report to when we monitor easements to make different notes about presence of invasives, trash, things like that. Currently, we use this paper form, and I believe that we need to kind of update that a little bit. So they were working on that and actually had some email correspondence with Devin about a week ago, and they're still interested in working with us, which kind of brings me into another thought that I had recently is partnerships. Because, we've worked with the um, Save Our Trees group, which is now part of the Watershed Stewards Academy. So we worked with Terry McKenna and Marianne Marbury. We did a invasive removal event on an easement at the Children's Museum on Spa Creek. That went really well, and they'd like to actually propose another one. And with trying to work with MDRRC, and I've also had a couple other groups express interest in working with us or supporting the goals of the Conservancy Board. So, with these different groups that want to interact with the Conservancy Board and help out on easements with stewardship and other, maybe some other tasks, it's become clear to me that partnerships are really going to, could be a key to helping, because we're all volunteers. We only have 24 hours in the day. We're only a maximum of 7 people. So I think working with other groups that have similar goals and are similarly aligned to the Conservancy Board would really be in everyone's best interest. And I don't know if we need to formalize that thought at all, but I'm wondering if there's someone who would be helpful in managing some of these partnerships, because so far I've coordinated with Save Our Trees and with the Seven River Association and with MDRRC, and I'm just finding it's just it's a lot to try to do everything. And I'm just curious if there's someone that would like to help kind of field some of these partnership inquiries, and if there's anything formal that we need to do to work with another group, like on an invasive removal or something like that.
I mean, I'd be interested in working on those partnerships. That's definitely my background is in outreach and partnerships. So if there's anything that I can do to assist with that, I would be very interested, whether it's just fielding questions or facilitating meetings or, coming up with if we have a volunteer liability photo release or anything like that for events, or do we work through other events? I do a lot of event planning, so if I can assist with that, definitely let me know.
Thank you, Sally. Just full disclosure, I had kind of thought of you already, but I was just, I didn't want to, just setting the stage. I think that would be wonderful. And I think that you'll probably be familiar with all of the folks that we've kind of partnered with
Awesome.
in recent past. But yeah, it's really things like helping to organize an invasive cleanup event, which really hasn't been a heavy lift. It's just trying to keep track of everything, and all of the other responsibilities of the Conservancy Board has proven to be a little bit challenging. And I'm certainly happy to help out too. I think it would just be nice to have, be able to tag team things instead of just falling on one person. So
For sure. For sure.
that would be wonderful. So it sounds like I can follow up with you on that, Sally.
Yes, sir.
I don't think we need to take a ton of time to talk about it right now, but Mr. Lyles, as far as partnerships go, is there anything formal that the Conservancy Board would need to do beyond the city's standard like waiver release process to have another group work on an easement with invasive removal or trash cleanup or something of that nature?
It depends on the property and the
Okay.
type of ownership that we have over the land or control we have over the land. But we have done that in the past for city control property where we actually own the property and folks want to come on. There are waivers and other kinds of agreements, indemnifications that we make folks sign up to. So it depends. I mean, we work with you on determining what would be the most appropriate kind of agreement. And it could include all those different types of provisions, or it could be something much simpler depending on what you're doing, how long they're doing it, and whether or not the Conservancy Board has an idea of its control right over the property. Is it just an easement? And what are the rights in the easement? We have to go through all of that, but something that we can do. It's we do it all the time.
Okay, excellent. That takes some, eases some of my kind of fears of how complicated this process might be. And I know at the Chesapeake Children's Museum, that's a city controlled property. So that one was quite simple. I think there was just a waiver release and we had a great event. We had a ton of volunteers come out with the Save Our Trees group, and they expressed interest in doing another, either there or somewhere else. So it sounds like that just needs to be run through the city. before we would understand totally what the requirements are?
Yep.
Okay.
I think like, well, actually, I mean, all of our easements are not city-owned property because the city can't have an easement on itself. But there are a couple of city parcels that we kind of manage as if they were easements. But yeah, like the vast majority of the easements that we would be working with are private property owners, usually like HOAs of some sort.
Right, and so for that, I guess it would be the city interfacing with the HOA to determine what would be needed to access the property and.
Yes, we'd have to look at the easement terms and determine what rights we have to do anything on the property. Most of them, if they're done correctly, and I'm most familiar with two because they're in litigation. Kingsport is one, and some others. But you know, if the easement's done properly, then we have right to go on and clear the property, and usually that's done by staff at this point for conservation easements. But there may be differences that I'm not aware of. But we look at each one individually and determine what's best and arrange a way for you to get your needs, your mission done on the property and tell you
Great.
what the ins and outs are.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think I've seen it written before as like the city or its agents or or something like that, which, you know, maybe under some circumstance, the Conservancy Board is an agent of the city. I don't know, but.
The Conservancy Board is an entity of the city.
An entity.
But each individual member of the board would have to sign something. It depends on what you're trying to do.
Okay.
The third party that's coming on, the Conservancy is kind of managing in the background. But it depends on the activity.
Okay. Yeah, I think for now it would be hopefully as simple as possible, but you know, maybe it would get more complicated as far as activities go at some point, but.
Jack, I'm going to ask a really dumb question as someone who's really new here. Is there like a list of the easements with like the last time it was inspected or cleaned or, you know, checked for invasives? Like, is there just kind of a basic, and is there any sort of protocol for like how we like go through that list and do that activity?
That is a wonderful question. That is actually a really smart question. And I think the answer is sort of. We do have, you know, our intention originally was to inspect each easement, of which there are, I don't know if there's even an official count, but if you go onto the Conservancy Board website, on the city's website, it has a list of easements. And then on our Google Drive, we also have a easement deeds and easement maps folder, and we also have an easement monitoring folder. And what I had done in the past is I created for inspections, I created a sign up sheet for monitoring the easements. And so we tried to kind of, you know, fairly distribute a few easements to each board member, who then was tasked with going to the easement and completing the easement monitoring report and reporting back to the board if there were any findings or if, you know, if anything came up. So that was kind of how we were doing it. I think we've not 100% stuck to that, but I think it's my intention that we get back to inspecting easements and using the materials, you know, adapting the materials that MDRRC is going to provide, which I don't have yet, to kind of increase our level of sophistication with our easement inspections so we can get better data and be able to make better decisions about stewarding these conservation areas. So that's kind of down here.
Got it. Wait, sorry, I may have should have asked this earlier. When I click the link that you sent in the email to the Google Drive,
yeah,
it takes me to the agenda, does not take me to the drive.
So
I don't know if I need access to that or.
Let me see who it's shared with. Yeah, it looks like. Like there's it looks like there's some folks who have access who don't need it, like are no longer on the board, and I don't see. It's owned, so Dylan, this kind of goes back to something I think we brought up in the past. The Conservancy Board Google Drive is owned by Racine. And then the members, here, let me maybe share my screen real quick again, just so we can all be on the same page. So this is the Conservancy Board, Annapolis Conservancy Board folder that I have. And in here has a bunch of, our agendas and minutes are in here. Our easement deeds, maps, reports, yada, yada. When I go to who it's shared with, it tells me Racine owns it. And then these folks have access as editors, but I don't see Sally on there, and I don't see Aaron.
Thank you for bringing that up, Aaron.
Yeah, I think anyone who's an editor should be able to add people, but if we wanted to make a new I think if you just go to that top bar up there, if you open that again.
Just add Aaron.
Yeah, if you type in Sally, try to see what happens. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm fancy.
Yeah, look at you. If we wanted to change ownership, I've asked Racine, and I'm not sure. She definitely, didn't transfer ownership. I'm not sure if she said she wasn't willing to, but effectively, ownership doesn't seem like it's going to change on this.
Okay.
But we can make a new folder if you wanted, and then we can just copy and paste everything there.
That might be the easiest solution, because there's not a ton of, I don't know what size this folder is, but there's not that much on it.
Yeah.
So that should be a pretty easy. And you've got editor access.
Yeah.
I'll
make a new folder, or if you'd like to, do it yourself, so you immediately have ownership, so I don't have to transfer. However you feel comfortable doing it. That's how we can proceed.
I think my only issue with if I had ownership is, I don't know how long I would be. I'd prefer to have the city have ownership and give ownership to the board members, as opposed to me creating a Conservancy Board folder.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can do that immediately.
Thanks, Dylan. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, of course.
We can kind of start fresh. So in here, Aaron, to go back to your question, so we had easement monitoring. We've got our basic easement inspection form in here, which I'm hoping, in working with MDRC, we're going to have they actually have like either an app or like a PDF fillable form that you can use. And it's just a little bit more sophisticated. This is very, very basic for this easement inspection report. And then we had our sign up sheet. So these were the easements that we were monitoring, and I think they tended to be our larger, kind of more notable easements. Some easements in the city are quite small, and so we weren't necessarily monitoring those every year. But we basically split these easements up between the board members, and then kind of set a due date of, hey, can you get these done by the end of the year? And we put together a report on all of the easement monitoring that was completed. So that's how that one works. I'm gonna stop.
Great, thanks.
But yeah, and I don't know if that answered all I think that was kind of a multi-part question, Aaron. I'm not sure if I answered all of it. But
Yeah, it's a great start.
Okay. I was gonna say another part of this too is that through some of the easement monitoring, I think we had found that maybe we couldn't locate certain documents in certain cases, and we didn't feel like we had a full picture of every easement and all of the associated documents and boundaries and mapping in the city. And so Patrick Browning, who's another member of our board who's not here this evening, led the charge on what we called our data gaps analysis. And Patrick actually put together a report that I think I have somewhere that basically said, here's where we think we don't have something. And so it sounds like the city is actually pursuing that as well, and they have a budget for doing some of that work. And I don't know what the total scope is, but so I think that's a good goal to have, is to try to fill in some of these missing pieces of information. So under administer and manage said properties, Data gaps, sounds like the city's working on it. I'm gonna check in with Jackie and Kate Pettit and just see what the scope is there, and if there's any way that the Conservancy Board can help out. Maybe we can provide what we had done in the past. The Gardens of Annapolis is the next item on here. That is a property in the city over near the Giant. And it actually shows on the map as a conservation easement, but I think in our data gap kind of analysis that we were performing, we couldn't find anything for that. And so we had kind of been working with the city to figure out if the property owner, if there was an easement. And I think the conclusion we came to is that there was no formal easement on that property. Is that, Karen, can I tap you to chime in there if you remember, or Linda?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, so this particular property, like, as long as I've been on the board, was considered an easement, and it has easement signs on it. But I guess when Diane Butler wanted to do invasive species removal on it, then the city found that there was no actual easement, which is really bizarre. So if there's no actual easement, we would definitely want to get an easement on it, because it's always been treated as an easement by our board and by the property owner. So it'd be good to get an easement on it as soon as possible. And I think that Linda was maybe reaching out to the owner. I'm not sure. Linda, I'll hand it over to you.
I never made contact, and I feel like I think I was hanging back because other people with the city were communicating with the property manager about access. But that's all I remember.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can rehash some of that, because I know it's been a little bit since we've discussed this, but it shows so this is showing as an existing conservation easement on the map. And if, for those who aren't oriented here, this is the Giant down Bay Ridge Road. And if you turn on Edgewood Road to go to the Ellen Moyer Park or the Burt Jabins Yacht Yard, it's the is it an assisted living home right there? Is that what it is?
I'm not sure it's assisted living, but yeah, it's
Senior
retirement.
Senior retirement living.
Yeah.
Rental.
So it is, it is a forested area. And I know that I think at some point there was some email traffic or phone call with either the property manager or someone of that nature. But I'm not sure where that ever went, if anywhere. So that's still a question, and I'll keep it on here for now. I don't know what the action should be. Is it to check in with, I think Jackie had some knowledge of it, so I'm not.
Well, the thing is that we've even notified the property owner to clear trash and clear invasives from it in the past, and they've complied, because we all thought it was an easement. So my suggestion is that if there's truly not an easement on there, we need to get an easement put on it ASAP, because we don't want to lose it. We've always considered it part of our easement
Michael, I'm interested to
overlay.
And this is Mike Lyles. Dylan has his hand up, but I would say the best thing for the board to do is presume that there is no written document for any property. Just presume that, because what we found is that a lot of times what people have said and what exists are two different things. So presume that the documents don't exist, and we'll try to figure out whether the documents exist, and then try to backfill the data and the information. But that's part of why we're doing the project. I think that Jackie is, kind of spearheading, and we're doing the legwork for it.
Understood. So in the case of, making that assumption, Michael, is there any steps that this board would take? Or is it a matter of, sending an email to Jackie, just reminding her, hey, the Gardens of Annapolis, just seeing if there's any updates there, we're still still recommending that an easement be placed on the property.
We'll see what Dylan has to say about that. He may have some.
Okay.
Yeah, so I want to echo what Mr. Lyles just said about, assuming that the documentation isn't there at this present moment. Though for this specific property, we do have an as-built, if you're familiar with what the as-built are, that shows a proposed easement. So at this present time, it seems as though the easement had been discussed during the planning phase, but whether or not the easement actually got recorded in the deed or in the plat isn't particularly clear. If I recall correctly, there actually is no plat to our knowledge of the property. So yeah, just like Michael Iles was just saying, we are recovering that information, digging into our archive, and we'll report back. But yeah, that's sort of a thing that is not terribly uncommon for the easements that we have from around that date. But yeah, we recently contracted with a surveying firm that we know has extensive experience doing that sort of thing. So we're optimistic we'll be able to clarify all the situations.
Great, Dylan.
And we can
Thank
always
you.
do a new easement confirming what should be there.
Right.
And that's always fine. And then we record those, because what we want to do for each easement is actually record them in land records.
Yeah.
And if what we found, they're not recorded, most of the ones we've been in litigation disputes about were not recorded. Everybody intended something to happen, but nothing happened. So if we presume that nothing exists, we definitely will check land records. But if it's not there, to me, I would rather just do a new one and get it done that way.
Right, and Linda, maybe you would have some insight here, but an easement not recorded in the land records is no easement at all. Is that correct?
This is a different kettle of fish than I'm used to, the development process. So I think Mr. Lyles has
Okay.
Well,
better insight into that.
Yeah, an easement is, even if it's not recorded, can still be enforced. The problem you get into is what we're dealing with now, when you want to enforce something, but nobody has the document because the easement's been there for 30 or 40 or 50 years. Everybody died, right? So no one has it. But it would be enforceable. The problem that we run into is that the land record is the best way to kind of keep it forever. And then you can always go there and pull it and see what the terms and conditions are. That's the only reason, because a lot of times these development issues have come about, and because of issues with the development, the easement was supposed to be given to the city or provided to the city. A plat was supposed to be done, but the people in the department changed and didn't follow through. The developer lost money and they changed. They didn't follow through. And so that's what we found in the 2 or 3 instances that I've been familiar with since I've been here.
Can I make a motion that the board make a formal recommendation to the city that if they find out that there's no easement here, that they just move forward with getting an easement put on it?
So moving, like what you're saying is you'd want to move to.
That we make a formal recommendation to the city that to move ahead with getting an easement put on this parcel if they find out that there's not one existing.
To me, that sounds like a reasonable recommendation, and kind of the guidance that I was hoping to get is kind of some consensus from the board. So
yeah, I just suggesting it just since we only meet every 2 months, and I don't want to like maybe Dylan finds out something in a week or 2, and then but they're waiting to tell us in 2 months, and then it like lingers on. So I just figure if we make a recommendation now to the city, like please just move ahead with getting an easement put on it, then things can keep rolling, hopefully, even though we don't meet so frequently.
all right, so to make sure I'm stating this correct, does someone want to make this motion?
I'm making the motion. I'm moving that the city formally recommend, I mean, not the city, I'm sorry. I'm moving that the board formally recommend to the city that they get an easement put on this parcel if it's not already on there.
Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Second.
Oh, Linda, you're first. Linda seconded. All in favor, the motion is to formally recommend to the city that if there is no existing conservation easement at the Gardens of Annapolis, that this board recommends that the city pursue an easement as soon as possible. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe that motion passes.
And
Okay.
just for the new members, I'm phrasing it this way because we have no authority, like we can only make recommendations. So that's why I'm phrasing it as making a formal recommendation. Like we can't tell the city what to do.
That's our bark, Karen. We have no bite. We can just bark, and that's our bark. Okay. Next item of business, and actually, I believe it is I think right here, is the Thomas Woods development. This is a small development off of Forest Drive that was just recently constructed. Patrick Browning and I visited it a few times. Apparently, there was supposed to be a couple of quite small, I think there are 3 separate small conservation areas as part of the development. And just to kind of reconnect this to our earlier conversation, those conservation areas came to the city through the development process, not through a voluntary dedication. So I drove past the other day, and it looks like that development is either completed or substantially completed. And so I guess my question is, what is the process for, and this question is for Dylan or Mr. Lyles, what's the process for a member of the Conservancy board, such as myself, to go on to that new development at Thomas Woods and inspect those easements, because it's not city-owned property.
You have no right to do that.
So we can't go and monitor the easement.
Well, you can monitor, well, okay, so as an entity, the question would be, can you monitor an easement not being on the property? Monitor the easement from the street or from someplace that's not private property? Because until we get the easement document that actually says what you can do, presume that there is no easement document, 1. 2, presume that if there is an easement document, we need to see it to determine what monitoring is allowed. Because normally the easement document provides the city and its entities, arms, departments, boards can enter the property at some point, anytime, on the weekends, 5 to 9 every day. It'll usually set out what the obligations, rights, responsibilities of all the parties.
Okay.
I wouldn't say take it upon yourself and go to an easement that we don't, 1, know is an easement, and 2, aren't aware of what the particulars are with respect to entry on the property to do the monitoring.
Yeah, Jack, why are you suggesting that it be monitored now before it's recorded?
I thought it was recorded because I'm trying to look through my email real quick.
Okay.
I thought either Ashley or Jessica had sent it along, and yeah, here we go. New Conservancy easement. New Conservancy easement being processed by the city. This was August 2023. So I maybe it's still not processed, but that was, a year and a half ago. This was the Thomas Woods. And so Patrick and I, we never went on the property, but Patrick Browning and I met nearby and walked along the right of way on Forest Drive and looked at the property. This is like right before or at the beginning of their construction. And there's no way to tell which areas were the conservation areas at that point. So now that it's all completed, it seems to me like it would be a little more apparent what are the formal conservation areas. And there was a map, there was some mapping attached that we had, and there was the written deed of easement and agreement between the property owner and the city of Annapolis. So it sounds like the first step there is determine if the easement was ever executed and or recorded.
We can find that out. So if there's a list you want to provide to me, we can do all the research or provide it to Dylan and Jackie Guile, because we're in the process of kind of redoing all of this now. And many times in the past, my folks were getting assignments around me, but I can't monitor whether the assignment's done unless I know. So I'm trying to tell all the boards, entities, departments, send the assignments to me. I'll assign it to someone, and then that way I can check to determine whether it's been completed or not.
Okay.
This is not one I remember. Not saying that I wasn't aware of it. I just don't remember it.
Yeah, fair.
One of the reasons why we're doing this project, I think, from Jackie Giles' office, is because we were losing track of these things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it almost sounds like it's a safer bet until we perform any more easement monitoring or inspections to connect with the city and provide a list before we're not going to go on to any, unless it's a property owned by the city that we consider a conservation easement, even,
Yeah, and I think it would be helpful to have a database on the city website where people can just go and look at the easement, pull it up. Even the conservation boards, conservancy board, because we just need access to these documents, and for whatever reason, some of these weren't completed, they weren't done, and they should be in one central repository.
In a perfect world, Mr. Lyles, in
Yeah.
a perfect world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean something like this where you could click on an existing easement and it would take you to documents, maps, whatever.
It should take you to a document.
Yeah. Yep. I see that vision, and I agree with that. I think that would be really helpful. So in light of not having that, for now, what we'll do is provide a list to the city and ask, name of easement and the question we have, or action action we'd like to take, and getting clarity on.
Just send it to me. We'll get right on it.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop sharing again. All right, so that kind of answers our easement inspections question, I think. So I think what makes the most sense right now is I would like to get everybody together to do a couple easement inspections just so we're all on the same page. And maybe we could do that sometime this spring before we get like total full leaf out and we lose, the ability to see a lot of stuff. I feel like it's actually good. We can see things like invasive ivy and bittersweet and things growing right now without all the leaves out. It's a little bit easier to see. So I'm curious, we had met before, and Linda and Karen met with us at the Brewer Ave easement, and Aaron, I think this is right over near you. It's a small easement in not Homewood, or is it Homewood? Germantown. The Germantown neighborhood. So maybe I can send out like a doodle
Backyard.
poll. Yeah. Maybe I can send out like a doodle poll and just try to find a date that, if all of us can't meet, at least most of us could meet. And I think it would just be helpful to just kind of go through our easement monitoring process and do that as a group together. And then I would feel a little bit more comfortable to go to the city and say, hey, we'd like to, monitor these easements. Do we need to take any, specific actions? And this one we can monitor from the right of way, so we don't actually need to go onto any property. So I think that we're fine to meet there. And also, I heard that there is some potential like water quality restoration work kind of happening in that corridor. So this easement it's actually not shown on the map, but the easement is at the end of Brewer Ave. It's at the headwaters of College Creek. And the city owns some of the property through there. And it's kind of like between the police department and the historic Brewer Hill Cemetery. It's in that area. So actually, Dylan, do you know anything about what's going on in College Creek and the headwaters there, and anything that relates to like the improving water quality or any easement stuff up there?
I know there's a lot of activity in terms of trying to get more easements there and trying to get grant funding for restoration projects there. But I'm not completely up to speed as to where all that stands.
Okay,
So no, I'm not totally aware of everything going on there.
okay, might be maybe it's Public Works or something, but
Yeah, you might want to reach out to Michael Rosberg,
okay,
or maybe Jasmine Wilding, and they would probably have more information.
okay. Yeah, it's kind of down under one of my other items down here, but okay, so does that sound good to everybody? Can I send out a doodle poll and we could meet at this Brewer Ave easement at some point in the next month or two, maybe just an evening during the week if that works best for everybody. Cool. All right, I'm gonna send out a doodle poll. And Dylan, I'm not sure if you'd be interested in joining us. I mean, I think that would be welcomed.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, cool. So I'll include you as well. And Mr. Lyles, I'm gonna go ahead and assume that you would love to be there, but you're quite busy and won't be able to be unless you want to come.
What's the date?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna send out a poll for people to provide their availability.
Yeah, just send it to me. I'll send it.
To you. Okay.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Oh, great. That'd be awesome. Cool. All right, moving right along. Save Our Trees. I think I've already discussed this a little bit. They're the group that we partnered with, did some invasive ivy removal at the Chesapeake Children's Museum in the past. They've expressed doing another event. I think I believe everyone's in support of that. I don't know if we need to formalize that support with a motion to say that we want to continue working with them, but it's my intention to try to facilitate Save Our Trees to remove ivy again at the Children's Museum. And I believe they've worked with the city on a bunch of areas. They've done Truxton Park. I think they've done Ellen Moyer Park. So I think they're really familiar with the city's requirements, and it is a city-owned property. So I think it's pretty straightforward from their perspective. They organize some volunteers, they send out a flyer, save the date, and then we meet up at this easement, remove English ivy, and usually go and get lunch or do something afterwards for those who are interested. So I don't know if we have to formalize that, but I would like to organize another event with them this spring. Does anyone have any thoughts on that or opposition or support?
I'd be in support.
Definitely support it.
Yep.
Cool.
Just wanting to I guess we want to get ahead of when it gets too far into the spring, when things start to flower, and then the attempt to remove invasives just ends up spreading seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Save Our Trees, they have it's down to a science for them.
Awesome.
And they've got a goal of removing or saving, I think, 10,000 trees by the end of this year, maybe. So they're really looking for opportunities for more ivy removal events. They've got a huge network of volunteers, and now they're with the WSA, Watershed Stewards program. So I think they have some funding through that. I'm not really sure, but okay. And just for everybody's, and Sally and Aaron, thank you for attending. But my next item on here was the Save Our Trees Community Forum, which was a few weeks ago. They asked me to speak as a representative of the Conservancy Board about conservation in the city. And it was really kind of focused on trees. They had the city urban forester there, Brian Adams, and they had a representative from Bartlett Trees. So it was really about saving trees, preserving tree cover in the city, increasing tree cover in the city. So thank you to Aaron and Sai for being there. And as a part of that community forum, I had some folks reach out afterwards. I had a conversation with Brian Adams, who I don't think Brian's ever been to one of our meetings, but it might be helpful for us to request that Brian attend and make some good use of his time at some point in the future, just as far as managing forested conservation easements. And also
Brian was our liaison for a while.
Oh, really?
I think that was before most of you were on the board.
It was before me.
I don't know if Linda, nope, it was before you also.
So.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think it would be nice to meet with Brian. He's super knowledgeable, and I think just thinking of ways that we can support Brian's work by supporting our duties, and just looking for ways that we can continue to work together, I think would be helpful. And then the next bullet, SRA. So I got an email from the Seven River Association, and they were interested, kind of similar to Save Our Trees, in providing some volunteers and doing either like trash cleanup or invasive pulls on some of the conservation easements. So again, that's another what I view as a partnership. They're kind of offering resources to help maintain and steward conservation areas in the city. I welcomed that because we're only a couple people and they've got a big network of volunteers. They're also working on a project in the Fairwinds community right now as far as for water quality. And Sally, I'm not sure if you saw it. I think they broke ground recently, so they're like starting construction on this stormwater management project. But I thought
Yeah,
that
it's pretty cool.
was kind of notable. And I guess that's not an easement. So I guess that's just community, that's Fairwinds, like community property.
I think so, yeah.
Maybe it could be a potential easement.
Ooh.
But so Sally, I think, you and I can discuss partnerships. But I think SRA is another, they've got a good network of volunteers. They're very aligned with our mission and goals in a lot of ways. So I think it makes sense to see how we can work together to support our mutual goals.
Definitely.
All right, I'm gonna keep moving, encouraging the preservation of environmentally sensitive land. I mean, it's kind of what we talk about all the time. Under here was our pilot new easement initiative, which I think we covered under the first header up there about the strategies to identify new properties. So yeah, again, I'll send out a reminder for mid-April. And if we can get everyone's input and then start, kind of prioritizing and figuring out how we can support the city in soliciting a new property for dedication. Further implement the goals for improving water quality. This is a kind of a big, broad one. It kind of touches on the College Creek Headwaters project, which I'll check in with Mike Rosberg on. But identifying easements to support goals. So that goes back to what we just talked about. The College Creek Headwaters status update. It sounds like I'll reach out to Mike Rosberg and see if there's any
I
way.
think this might be a different, was the project that you're talking about reaching out about, is that off of Taylor? You were saying it was by the police department?
So I don't know the total scope of it, but I think it starts at the big outfall where College Creek starts.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then it runs.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I think it runs
I
down.
just wondered if they were separate things,
Oh.
but it sounds like you're saying it's all one. So
I
that's
think it's
cool.
all one, and I don't
Yeah.
really totally understand, but I talked to an engineer friend of mine who was also at the community forum, and he said, "Oh yeah, we're doing some work in the College Creek headwaters there in off of Woodlawn," I think he said. And
Yeah, I think it's
I said,
Woodlawn.
what? I said, we have an easement right over there. I said, I've been over there a bunch of times. I'm really familiar with it. So
Okay.
I'll check in with Mike and see if I can just get an update on that and if there's any way that we can help. Also, a couple other exciting updates on water quality. The Severn River Association got a grant to produce their Severn River Action Plan. So they had a consultant go and map the whole Severn River watershed into little small subwatersheds. And then in each of those subwatersheds, apply metrics and values to those metrics to be able to prioritize which subwatersheds were the best for restoration. And lo and behold, out of 77 subwatersheds, Weems Creek came out as the #1 priority. And most, a good chunk of the Weems Creek watershed is in the city, like maybe half of it. And Sally, I know that you're very familiar with Weems Creek watershed. And actually, near the top of the Weems Creek watershed is the city's new public works building that was constructed a few years ago. And I think there's on our map, on the Greenways map, there's a potential new easement there. So Weems Creek being the #1 subwatershed for restoration, being in the city, having a connection with Severn River Association, there could be some potential there for water quality improvement. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's awareness. I don't really have anything else to update there other than I think the Seven River Association is very interested in Weems Creek, and however we could help, I'd be interested. And then also the whole Watershed Act, for those who weren't familiar, this whole Watershed Act was passed at the state level a few years ago, maybe a year or two ago, and applications rolled in last fall. The city, Anne Arundel County, and the Resilience Authority kind of jointly submitted an application along with a bunch of community partners, submitted an application for the Severn River. And last, I think Friday it was, DNR put out a press release that the Severn River was selected as one of the 5 watersheds across the state that will be part of this whole Watershed Act. And Sally, you may know more about this than I do. I know there's something about unlocking funding and matching, and I'm not sure totally where things are going to shake out with the Severn River and the whole Watershed Act, but I think it represents an opportunity for the city and, probably an opportunity for the Conservancy Board to play a role in, watershed restoration or helping with conservation easements and improving water quality.
Yeah, I know that it was a $47 million request. So it was very, very significant and included a lot of outreach and restoration projects as well as job development, and working on private property as well. So it's a Mac Daddy application, definitely the biggest thing we've ever been a part of. And the final funding level won't be announced until the budget gets settled right now, but the state management team is currently working with the Resilience Authority to go through the proposal with a fine-tooth comb and see what things have actually materialized versus what things are more hopeful projects. And then I think they'll determine that final funding level either, I think, in April or sometime around when the state budget gets handled.
Excellent, Sally. Thank you. That was way more than I knew already. So really, I think this presents a big opportunity. If we have recommendations we'd like to make to the city as far as improving water quality and conservation easements that could be associated with that, I mean, that is our duty. We should be bringing that to the city's attention. So, and it's all kind of tied together. New easements, water quality. All of these things can kind of are kind of threaded together. So I thought that was an exciting update, and it sounds like we'll know some more about funding levels and such in the future. But I think just having your whole Watershed Act hat on and thinking about areas that could be beneficial for water quality in the city, I would encourage us all to do that. And under our last duty here, provide for the development of additional recreational resources of the city. We've got the Kingsport easement, and Mr. Lyles, I don't want to give you heartburn, but I was just curious if there's anything to discuss for the Kingsport easement. I know we had provided some comment on it a few months ago.
Well, it's a mess. But that said, the lawsuit that was brought by Kingsport HOA against the city was dismissed by the court. So we prevailed in a way. The case continued with Kingsport versus the Careys. And there is a memorandum of opinion that was written by the judge, basically giving the Careys the right to access their property on the road, the little driveway. Mm-hmm. But also removing any right by the Kingsport HOA to do anything to separate or segregate the easement from the roadway. Told the Careys they can't do anything. Everybody's just to leave the land be. Use the road to get into the property, but she didn't really make any other pronouncements about some of the other things that the Careys were complaining about. So kind of split the baby on it. But basically, the problem arose because even though there was an easement, the property wasn't transferred properly from the original owners. So when they created the easement, they created this little enclave, which is the Carey's house, but never settled the issue with the road and their ability to protect their property from encroachment by people visiting the easement. So all of that was kind of up in the air, and kind of got resolved. I will send around the memorandum of opinion for you to review, for yourself, and you can ask any questions of me based on what you're reading. But from the city perspective, we can still monitor the easement, the conservation area, go on it, protect it, cut trees down if we need to, protect it. And that's really all we cared about. Can we go down the road and take action to protect the easement? And yes, we can. And the Careys can't prevent us from doing that.
Oh, excellent summary. Thank you. That was helpful, because I know this has been a long-going thing. We have visited the Kingsport easement. It is one of the largest conservation areas in the city. I'm going to share my screen again, just for Sally and Aaron. I think everybody else would be familiar with this area, but this is off of Forest Drive behind the Safeway. You go through the Kingsport neighborhood, and then it's here off of Childs Point Road. This is this parcel is owned by the city of Annapolis, and there's a driveway that runs through it to this property back here. So there was an easement for the homeowners to gain access to their property, and then I think the neighborhood here and the city, there's a small like kayak dock back here, and it sounds like there's a lot of history here, but basically trying to figure out what can and can't be done with the easement area, and what are the rights of the property owners next to the easement is the gist there.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so if this is city property, who holds the easement? I thought these were city easements.
The easement to what?
Well, we're saying that this is an easement property. This property has an easement on it.
Well,
It's like, I guess I'm asking about conservation easements. That's
okay.
really all our interest in.
Yeah.
Is any conservation easements?
Yeah. So basically, the land was deeded from these original owners, which had to be brought into court. One of them lives in another country now. Anyway, so they deeded the land to a developer to build the HOA and to set aside some of the property for conservation. And oh, by the way, some of the property would be held and transferred to somebody else for a house. So there's 2 or 3 owners in that strain. That's where the Careys come in. When they got transferred the property, they weren't aware or didn't read the documents that there was an easement that abutted the property that they purchased. So when the property was developed, they didn't develop everything. They just developed a part of the property for the HOA, but reserved this house, this little lot that now has a house and a driveway. So the paperwork to do that transfer wasn't done properly or clearly. And so what's left is for the court to figure it out. That's what the memorandum of opinion basically sets forth, that the rights of the public to access this easement are now undisturbed. The right of the Careys to use the road, which is technically a joint owned road with the easement, very confusing, cannot be disturbed. They can't close it, and neither can the public or the city close it. This road, everybody can use the road. Additionally, the Careys can't block anyone from going to the conservation easement, even though some of that seems to transgress into their use and enjoyment of their property. Very confusing. A lot of bad lawyering there, and nothing was done quite correctly. unfortunately.
So you're saying like that, so my question is like, who holds the easement? So we don't know,
Well,
because it's like up in the air, or,
yeah, you're asking the wrong question, respectfully.
oh, okay.
The
Okay.
only thing you care about is,
Hmm.
can the public use the conservation easement for going in and look at the trees, look at the water, enjoy nature? Yes. Can you go down that road that leads to it? Yes. Can you go on the Carey's property and do what you want to do? No. Can the Careys stop the public from going to the easement area, the wooded area, and taking in nature? They cannot. Can the HOA do anything to stop the Careys from going down the road to their house? They cannot. That's
I
really,
guess the reason why I'm asking is just because since we are in charge of managing all the city held easements, so if it's not a city held easement, then it becomes an ambiguous thing for us. So like
well,
all the conservation easements at Kingsport, we thought were HOA owned property with a city easement on it. So that's why I'm trying to sort out.
yeah, the easement is really one that the city is allowed to maintain. So the conservation board and the city were the beneficiaries of the easement for the conservation area. In association with that, the city was given certain rights under the easement to go on and maintain the property, not the Conservancy board, but the city. So the city can drive on the property and cut down trees if they need to be cut down, prune trees if they need to do it, mow the grass if they want to do, if they need to do that, all in aid of protecting the conservation area as a natural resource.
Okay, and then I have another question I had with, like, I think the last thing I remember us hearing about was that there was a question about putting a parking lot in the easement for whatever happened with that. Did they
Yes,
get permission to do that?
no, because
Okay,
there is no right to put the parking lot there.
okay,
The problem was the Careys were complaining that people were driving down the roadway and parking on the
Yeah.
conservation easement and using their property to turn around once they parked on the conservation easement. So they wanted to block people from transgressing their property in order to maybe back up and go back up the road. The court said they can't do that. They can't plant trees, put a fence. Their property is kind of their line is their line, but it's open. If people trespass on their property, then they have a right to take action against those people by calling police or taking civil action, but they can't put any obstructions that would prevent people from using the road and going to the easement. And technically, you're not supposed to be driving down the road anyway. The only entity that can drive down the road is the city. People are not supposed to be driving down, but over the past, people have been doing it. So I think now that the city knows this and has the memorandum of opinion, we have to try to protect it by putting signs up, no driving down the road. The Careys can drive down the road to get to their house, but technically nobody else can.
So it sounds like this maybe compromise that Jackie was working on with parking along the road and all of that was just set aside. And now there's a legal
Yeah,
opinion. Okay.
yeah. And we were going to put a turnaround on the easement. We could still do that. The city could do that, and still might. But you got to be careful that we do a lot of other things in addition. Signage. You can't drive down, so you can drive to the front area, and maybe we do a little parking lot up there. And I think the easement kind of allows us to do that in a non-invasive way. But under the easement, you technically can't drive down that road to go visit the easement. It's really you got to walk down that road. But people were allowed to drive down. And so there's an enforcement piece that the city needs to kind of take seriously as well.
So, Mr. Lyles, to your knowledge, are we allowed to park out there on the, like if we wanted to go to the easement, for, for a monitoring event or whatever it may be. Are we allowed
Yes,
to
yes.
park on Childs Point Road?
We can go down the road and we can drive onto the easement and park on the grass.
Okay.
As long as we're doing the maintenance, monitoring kinds of activities.
Okay. So
It
not for
doesn't-
just enjoyment
Right.
passing.
The easement doesn't provide that the public can drive onto the easement.
Understood. Okay, that's a good clarifying point. Thank you. Okay. Well, that was fun. All right. So it sounds like maybe there'll be more to come from that, but thank you. I think that was a good substantive update. The last item I have on here is, and Dylan, this may be something that I was hoping to get an update from you on, is the Hawkins Cove / Truxton Connector Trail. I think we provided a letter of support for this some months ago. I'm just curious if there's anything updates there for us or any actions we can take to support the city.
Mhm. Yeah, so we did successfully put in that grant application. And my understanding was that the award was supposed to be announced before legislative session, but I have not heard anything. I believe part of the issue is that some of the reviewers were actually legislators themselves. Now, I might be incorrect about that. I didn't see that in writing. That's what I heard. But again, I haven't heard of any sort of award being given out. I will contact the main applicant. I believe it was Ann Ritterer who made the official application, and see if she's gotten any word back. But that's really the only update I have.
Cool. That works for us. We're just seeing if there's anything there because I wasn't super familiar with it, but it sounded interesting and I like the idea of connectivity and green space. And so excellent, Dylan. Thank you very much. Our last item on the agenda this evening was welcome new board members. I think we did that at the beginning, but really happy to have you all here. Really looking forward to working together. I've got a lot of notes jotted down here, a lot of action items. I would encourage all of our members, if you have a thought or idea, or you would like to do something, or you want me to do something, call me. If you don't have my number, I can send you my cell number, email me. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. I want to try to be more proactive as we go forward and work together. And I know we're all volunteers, but I really would like to try to, prioritize some of our goals and duties and really be as effective as we can as a team. So I will be here if you have any questions. Mr. Lyles, you've been so incredibly helpful tonight. I think that's the most we've interacted with our city Office of Law liaison for a very long time. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And Dylan, as always, you're great and always super helpful. So it sounds like we'll get some movement. We'll get a Google Drive going. Too many action items to try to summarize right now, but it is 7:10 p.m. and is there a motion to, how does this work, Mr. Lyles? Can I just end the meeting? Can I say I move to end the meeting, or do I have to get a motion?
You can't move. You're the presiding officer. So you can say, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
And ask for a second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Sally has seconded.
All in favor of
All in
saying-
favor of adjourning this meeting.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much, everyone. We will meet again here. Our next meeting is, I don't have the date, but in 2 months.